Hey y'all, and welcome to The Wannabe Author. I'm Taryn, a writer figuring out how to turn my publishing dream into reality, one chaotic step at a time. This is the place where we talk books, writing struggles, mental health, and everything in between. Whether you're a writer, a reader, or just curious about the process, I am so glad you're here. Let's jump in. Oh my god. Hey y'all, and welcome back to The Wannabe Author. I'm your host, Taryn Christine, and today's episode is just me. I know we're sad that I don't have somebody on today, but I'm gonna try and do more episodes of just me. Not because I don't love my interview episodes, they're actually my favorite episodes to record, but I need to do better at doing the just me episodes. I think I've only had like 2. So we're gonna try and do better, have some good balance in there. But I absolutely love my interview episodes. The episodes so far have been fantastic. So fantastic. The people who have come on to be with me on The Wannabe Author, I've learned so much. I don't know about you, but I've learned so much from each journey, each story. I have loved every single episode. It has been so fantastic, and I'm so grateful to you guys for listening and watching. It truly is just, I'm loving this. All right, this episode is what would I call it? Wow! An encyclopedia for authors, maybe? What is an encyclopedia? I don't really know, honestly. I kind of need a... Oh dear. Encyclopedia. Okay. An encyclopedia is a reference work or comment. Oh my gosh. A reference work providing summaries of knowledge, either general or special, in a particular field or discipline. Okay. Yeah. It's like an encyclopedia for authors. Not really. It's more just this episode is a bundle of resources, author resources I have collected thus far in the journey that have helped me get to where I am, even though that's not very far. But for those of you who are aspiring, who are querying, who are publishing, we all are learning at different points in the journey, and it's important to have resources that you can go and learn from. So I bundled together a bunch of resources. Before we jump into all of that, though, I always love to start out with what I'm currently reading. And I also ask my interviewees what they're currently reading. And I want to talk about this. And I've mentioned this multiple times, but if you're new here, this is why I talk about current reads. And it's not because I'm like trying to be a book influencer or I want people to like, you need to read these books. What I'm trying to influence you to do is to read more, because I know we get so busy. I know we are so focused on our own works that it's hard to focus on other works. Well, I've heard over and over and over again from other authors, other agents, other people in the industry, and I'm going to be another one of those parroting that whole message, is that reading is one of the most valuable ways to learn how to be an author. Obviously not the publishing and querying part, but in writing and creating your craft. Reading inside, outside of your genre you're currently writing in is so important. There's so much inspiration that can be drawn from reading. So if you're currently feeling like, oh, I can't read because I'm writing this book and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, please prioritize your reading. My current reads. So I try to have a couple listening, a couple physical reads. I'm physically reading The New York Charm by Riley Winters, which is one of my friends who self-published just recently. So darling so far. Absolutely love it. And then I'm listening to Picture Perfect by Jodi Picoult. So sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I had no idea what it was about, and I actually mentioned this book because I had started listening to this book when I interviewed somebody recently. And they said, is that the thriller or the romance? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm guessing since it started out with some blood, it's a thriller. But I'm still kind of like I don't really know where it's going yet. So if it is a thriller, it's my first thriller, so that's exciting. But I've seen Jodi's books everywhere. I haven't picked up one of her books yet, and so this one was free on Audible, so I started it. I'm liking it. It's entertaining. I listen to it while I get ready every day. All right. Now, as it just is being me, I'd like to update you all on querying, publishing stuff. So, as we know, um, my original book that I was on submission with kind of up in the air. I hope to start sharing more details regarding that and an actual game plan soon in the future. Thinking the end of this month, so stay tuned. Currently, right now, though, I did write another book. It's a bit of a psychological drama, lots of romance, a hint of magical realism. It's very emotional, lots of tragedy. I am querying that out right now. So far, we've gotten quite a few rejections. And then what else? I did have a full manuscript request from one of my agents, like the one of the ones I really want. So, we'll see. We'll see. Really hoping that works out. That's the update though on publishing, what I'm currently reading. So, let's dive into this author resources episode. So I'm going to be kind of following the setup of this book. This is funny you should ask mostly serious questions to mostly serious. Oh wait, wow. We're going to start that over. Funny you should ask mostly serious answers to mostly serious questions about the book publishing industry by Barbara Poelle. I'm sorry. I don't know how to pronounce that. I should have looked it up. Um this Barbara is a literary agent and she wrote this book. This has been my Bible since I started looking into traditional publishing. There's 3 parts to this book. She goes through the craft, querying, and then publishing. Very, very informative book. I recommend it to anyone who is curious about getting into the traditional publishing industry. It's very, very informative. Now, as it goes by in this book, where it starts out with the craft and answering questions and giving information regarding the craft, I'm going to start with giving some resources regarding writing a book and preparing your craft for either self-publishing or for querying. One of my favorite books that I have read in learning how to be better at writing characters specifically, because I am more of a character-driven author and reader, honestly, is Story Genius: How to Use Brain Science to Go Beyond Outlining and Writing a Riveting Novel by Lisa Cron. I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrong too. Wow. I'm failing right now. I can feel it. This was a fantastic book. It really helped with mapping out a book. I don't usually map out books. Well, before this third book that I wrote, in my first and second book, I'm very much a discovery writer. I just kind of go. But this really taught me how to map out my characters, map out the plot, and really give depth to my characters. So this was a fantastic book. Absolutely loved it. I highly recommend it if you're struggling to really give depth to your characters or plot. Now, I will always, as I said in the very beginning, reading. You got to read. You got to read. These are some of the best resources. Now, I've got a podcast for you. It's called No Right Way by V.E. Schwab. It's a fantastic podcast. One of my favorites. V.E. She's one of my favorite authors ever. Ever. I absolutely love her. I'm obsessed with her. Now, her podcast is she invites other authors, big name authors, onto her podcast to talk about their writing processes and how there's no right way to write. It's actually eye-opening because there's times where I'm like, I don't think I'm doing this right. I don't think I'm not writing the right way. And you really do see that authors, they write in so many different ways. I actually just listened to an episode today, and I cannot remember the author's name that she interviewed. Let me look it up. Jessie Q. Jess Q. Sutanto. I know I'm failing at these names. I'm so sorry. So sorry. She's the best-selling author of Dial A for Aunties and Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. Very cute. Her writing process was so funny. She's like very extravagant and checks herself into this really nice hotel, and she's checked herself in so many times that they know her at this point. So like I've never heard of anyone doing that, which that's nice. I wish I could do that. One day, one day. But then there's others who are just like, I just need to lock myself in a room for a little bit and write this many words. Some are procrastinators, some are pantsers, some are outliners. I know she's an in detail outliner, while others that she's interviewed are discovery writers like me. So it's very all over the place. There is really no right way, and it's very interesting to hear how maybe your favorite author might write, and I bet you they're probably on that podcast. They've probably been interviewed on that podcast. So very, very interesting podcast. I binge it. I listen to it over and over again. I think I've repeated her episodes like multiple times. So huge fan, huge fan. I'll be sure to link all these below, by the way. Now, Brandon Sanderson, he's got a YouTube channel, and he does a lot of speeches and seminars where he goes into world building because he's like the fantasy god of books, his whole world and galaxy that he's put together. I'm saying this as someone who hasn't read any of his books yet, but I've heard so many great things. But he's a fantastic writer. I mean, actually, I have read one of his books. It was one of his novellas. And I loved it. Had so much fun. I don't know how it falls into the whole world, but it's really good. And he has these seminars where he teaches kids creative writing, building worlds, characters. He goes into how you need to write, like write and write and write. There's a lot of information. He's a wealth of information. So I will be linking that too, but his YouTube channel. Now, another resource that you can use while writing are beta readers. Listen, I never really did readers before. With my very first book, I had my friend who I would send her chapter by chapter and she would hype me up and stuff. I don't know if I consider that a beta read. It was more like emotional support. But beta readers who actually give advice and feedback, I did that for the very first time for real, like actually set up. Um this last book that I just wrote that's now in the query trenches. Um that was such a valuable experience. I did send out I did send out more copies of my book to beta readers than I received feedback, but the feedback that I received was fantastic. Readers got to me and wrote out details and questions and thoughts and loves. It was so interesting to have somebody see the book from the outside point of view and point out things where I totally missed it and didn't even realize. So beta readers, I think, are very valuable. Some people use them, some people don't. But as somebody who's just used them for the first time, I I was very it was very valuable to me. I have gone without using beta readers before. That's totally fine. Like, you can totally do it. I'm learning and I'm new, so I think beta readers were very important for me to use. But again, it's not a make it or break it kind of thing. Okay. Author critique groups. I don't do any groups. I'm very much a lonely wolf because I'm a chatter. I think that's my problem is I'm a chatterbox. I have met up with many authors to write, I have not once written one word in those meetups. And I've done multiple of these meetups. But sometimes that's very valuable for some people, like to just sit there with somebody and write and bounce ideas off of. I know I've bounced ideas off of people, and that's been very, very valuable. But just writing, no, I haven't done that. There are also critique groups. I've never gotten myself into a critique group, but it's very encouraged by agents and other people in the industry to find author critique groups where you trade books and manuscripts and critique each other's writing. I can see how that could be very valuable. I just haven't done it. But yeah, those are the resources I gathered for the craft. Now, let's move in to querying. The resources I have for querying honestly are so good. And maybe it's because I'm currently querying, and so they've been they've been on my mind lately. Now, there's very few, but they're very, very valuable. Now, I'm going to start off with the Bookends Literary Agency, their YouTube channel, their blog, and their TikTok. So it's usually run by Jessica Faust and James McGowan. They are like the head agents who run those pages. Jessica runs their TikTok, and she goes through different advice for querying authors and different people in the industry. Very, very valuable. But their YouTube channel, where James McGowan and Jessica Faust both sit together and talk, is so informative. I literally today, while I was at work, I think I watched probably 10 of their videos. Just very informative, very quick, easy easy to understand videos that go into what agents are looking for in authors and what is it? Valuable things to know when querying your manuscript, and what agents are looking for in a query letter, and just very, very many different things. They even talk about self-published authors looking for an agent and why you would look for an agent. And so it's just that their YouTube channel, which again I will link, a wealth of knowledge. It's been my Bible as of late. I've been watching as many videos as I can, and they are just very darling people. I love listening to them talk. They work really well together. They also interview and introduce a lot of the agents at their agency. So if you've been looking into bookends and querying bookends, you can most likely find the agent that you're trying to query has done an interview and talks about what they're looking for. So it's been valuable. Very, very valuable. I highly, highly recommend that you look into it. And now, a podcast that I absolutely love and I've been following for a long time now is The Shit No One Tells You About Writing. Now, this one is also ran by some agents, and they will critique query letters. And they have different programs for authors and writers, and it's a very informative podcast. Like, it's been one of my absolute favorites. And they will go through query letters and starter pages to different manuscripts, like with the permission of the author, of course. And they talk about what they would change about the query letter, what caught their eye, what they wish they would have seen more of. It's so informative. So informative when building your query letter and getting ready to try and sell your manuscript to agents. And even in the first pages of your manuscript, they'll say, "Why didn't we get more of this?" And I'm curious to see more of that. It's very, very good. They will go through manuscripts in very many different genres, so you can most likely find a manuscript similar to your genre and listen to them critique it. It's very good. Now, another thing, which this isn't a specific resource, but it's an advice, look up the agents that you're wanting to query. A lot of them have done interviews and articles. With my original agent, I actually did find an interview that she did, and she talked about what catches her eye, and she also talked about her process of like when she does a call, what she's looking for, and all this stuff. And that helped me have a lot of peace of mind when I was originally like working with her and seeing if she would extend an offer of representation. It helped give me peace of mind, like, oh, so I'm doing really well right now, you know? And recently, even right now, as I've been querying, I have found many interviews in which the agents that I've queried have taken part of, and I've gotten to listen to them critique different, like one of the agents that I queried was on the Shit No One Tells You About Writing, that podcast, and she critiqued a letter with them and talked about what stood out to her and what she looks for and stuff. It was very, very interesting, and I felt semi good about my query letter. But I highly recommend just looking up your agent. Most likely you can find a lot of things that they're looking for past what they put on their website, you know? Now, resources for publishing. I don't have very many resources because you know what? I haven't gotten there yet. Anyway, I have a couple podcast episodes, or not episodes, but podcasts. This podcast I've actually really enjoyed. I've listened to it from beginning to end and back over again. But it's the Publishing Rodeo podcast. Sunya Dean and Scott Drakeford, both authors, both published by the same company. One of their books did really well. The others didn't, and so now they put together this podcast where they talk to booksellers, agents, different editors, and talk about why the publishing industry is the way it is, and what does it take for a book to really take off, you know? That's a very interesting podcast to listen to, very informative. Another one is the Writer Files podcast. Different authors get on and talk about their journeys, how they got to where they are, and I've thoroughly enjoyed that podcast because you know what I've learned more than anything is that there is no straight line to succeeding in the publishing industry. Everyone makes it in different ways, even in the querying. Some people don't even go through the query trenches. Some people go through Twitter things. I don't even know. We've talked about it on the podcast before because a couple of my authors that have joined us have gone through like different events and Twitter, I can't even remember what it's called. Twitter events, I think that's what it was. Like a querying event. A pitch event on Twitter. Yes. So there's no straight line to getting published. And so that's why I love listening to different authors and what their journeys have been to publication, because then you learn, oh, so it literally can happen in any way. It doesn't have to just be this way. I need to just put myself out there. I need to keep working because you know what? It might not work out the way I'm anticipating, but it's going to work out because it works out, you know? So those have been just a few resources that have been just so informative and inspiring and helped me in my journey thus far. Now, some overall resources that aren't particular to the craft or querying or publishing. Networking. Networking is so valuable. I know that agents and publishers aren't looking for you to have an already set up social media base or following, but I think it's very important. And I'm not just saying that as somebody who's literally broadcasting all my fails right now on podcasts and every other social media platform, but I just mean networking and making connections has been such a big, what is it, asset for me in my journey. I've had different authors reach out. I had a referral agent at one point from an author who reached out. So I think it is just so valuable to be networking, and not only with authors, but different reader influencers as well. I've had the privilege of having a couple content creators and reader influencers on the podcast to talk about books. And I think it's very important to create those connections and network those people, because like who's gonna read if not them, you know? Like, having friends and connections in the industry as you go into it is so important. And I'm speaking from experience. Like, I think those have been my most valuable resources as an author, as I've especially going into the query trenches for a second time and navigating that whole thing. It has been invaluable to me to have the friends and authors and connections I've made in the last few months of starting my social media base. Interviews. Um just recently, actually, I went and looked up Chloe Gong, one of her very first interviews. I thought she had self-published and was picked up. No, she started out in the query trenches just like me, and she went through the traditional publishing route. It was very informative. Very good interview. I think it's very valuable to go and read articles and different blog posts of interviews and um stuff of authors who they're doing it. They're doing the thing, you know? Um, Again, books. I'll always say books. Those are an overall essential resource. Other authors, like with networking, there's also authors that post about their journeys. I've got a few. I've had her on the podcast before, but Ivy Marie, that's she is so great at posting all about things that she's learned in her journey to publication. Also, Kelsey, who we just interviewed last week. There are a few authors that will be very informative. Victoria Aveyard on TikTok. She is so great at um explaining her publishing journey. She actually kept a very up to date video journal, diary, I don't even know. She recorded all the things of getting her book that's coming out soon. Not soon, but Tempest, I think that's what it's called. She recorded her whole process of getting that sold and all of that. I thought that was so cool to see. But she's very good about really informing everyone of that stuff. Now, I think it's also important to follow different author substacks or newsletters. I currently follow one of my favorites is Alyssa DeRogatis. She was actually the first interview we had on the podcast, but she's so awesome at like creating these newsletters and keeping people up to date. She's so fun to follow, such a great author. She started out self-published and moved on to traditional publishing. She just finished her second book. She's getting ready to sell that. So, very fun to follow and very informative. Also, different authors' YouTubes and TikToks. They there is so much knowledge to be gathered from each of these different authors and their stories. Just figure out the authors that their books have influenced you the most. Go find their stuff. They've got stuff. Every author does, for the most part. And you know what? Book influencers. I think it's very important, and I've seen it said by multiple agents, multiple people in the industry. You got to know what's trending and what's sellable. And I think you can find that out by listening to different reader platforms. One of my favorites, because they're so well rounded in the different books that they do recommend, is the I'll Read What She's Reading podcast. They are three book influencers who they do recommend just genres all over the darn place, and I absolutely love it. I've learned a lot actually from them. I've learned about what readers are liking and not liking. I think it's important to pay attention to, especially if you're wanting to attract different readers who are loving this certain genre. And that's why I've started bringing on readers onto the podcast to talk about what authors should write about. Not just write about, because you never want to write for the trends, obviously, but you do want to keep them in mind, because you know what? It is a business. Just how it is. But you can find ways to attract different readers. I know I just had someone on the podcast. her episode will be up soon, but she talked about how she loves seeing the different tropes that are in books, and then other readers who aren't loving that kind of genres she is, they don't want to see the tropes that are in the books. That's too spoilery for them. So you can find ways to market your book by listening to the readers, seeing what catches their eye, seeing what attracts them. I think that's very important for all authors to keep in mind, because we all are going to have to market our book in some way or another, even if you're self-published or not. But last but not least, I hope this podcast, this YouTube channel, is a resource for you. I really am trying to make sure I ask the right questions, get the best authors on. We've had so many debut authors come on that have been, it's been so cool to see their journey, see what's gotten them to where they are, and I think those are some of the most important interviews I've had the privilege of conducting, is seeing people who are just a few steps ahead of us aspiring authors. Seeing that, you know what, they did it, they got there. It's not just these people who've been in the industry for years and years and years. There are authors who are making a break into the industry, and if they can do it, so can you. I also do have a couple very exciting guests that will be on the podcast. One of them being a New York Times bestseller. I'll give you a couple hints, see if you can guess, but I'll give you a couple hints, see if you can guess. Never mind. But we're going to have some big authors on who have gone from self-publishing to traditional publishing, are New York Times bestsellers. They're in the romantasy genre. I also have had the privilege of interviewing my friend Jennifer. Her book is coming out later this year, and she's also a screenwriter. So if you're an author who's wanting to also create movies, that was such an interesting podcast. That was such an interesting interview that I got to listen to, because I know nothing about screenwriting, and to hear that she got to do both is so incredible. She's also a wealth of knowledge and one of the sweetest people I've ever met. Um, but I truly hope that the wannabe author is a resource for you, in whatever part of the journey you are in. I hope to get on more authors and creators that can help enlighten us all as we continue on our journeys. This has been fun. If you have any more questions, or any resources that I've missed out on, and you're like, this would be such a great resource, you should look into it, please comment them below. I know you can comment on Spotify, but also comment on YouTube, or DM me. Please DM me. I love to record different resources on my Instagram. I often post about different podcast episodes that I highly recommend for different authors and creators. So if there are more resources out there that you're like, you're missing out on this, please let me know, and I will add it to what we need to be talking about more here. So thank you again. I love y'all. I'll see you next Thursday. Bye.